Now, from Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH. This is Sports Daily with Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Happy Monday to you here on Sports Daily. National Championship Monday on the men's side. We have a national championship in the books on the women's side of college basketball. We have massive college basketball coaching news, both nationally and somewhat related to us here locally up in Manhattan with Jerome Tang, who signs an extension on Friday. It has been a wild weekend of sports. Oh, by the way, the Royals appear to be pretty good. And you know, all kinds of other stuff. So we're excited to do it here with you today on Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht here, Tommy Castor with you. Jad Chambers is producing, manning that KFH hotline. It will be a hot hotline today. We'll have lots of giveaways for you. We're going to give away some Wind Surge vouchers. We're going to give away some HTO. We will be talking to you about a lot of things, taking your calls. So be sure and listen in and tune in for your chance to do that. All kinds of goodness on the program today. We appreciate you listening to us here on KFH or on the Odyssey app. We appreciate you watching us on our Facebook, YouTube, or X streams. A lot of places you can take in the show, a lot of places to leave your comments, and we're ready for them today. Tommy, how was the weekend? How are you?
Hey, it was good. You know, good weekend. Pretty windy outside, but I think it's going to be calmer today, which is good. We've got that eclipse that's happening today.
That's right.
So it's a busy day, and you know, I don't want to spoil the lead topic, but I was about to go to bed last night, like literally about to close my eyes, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to refresh everything one more time, and then the John Calipari news breaks, and I'm up for like another 2 hours. So there's a lot to get to on the show today. Looking forward to diving right in.
Yeah, look, we had that. We've got the eclipse tonight. Like it's a crazy time. This eclipse is one of the biggest things that like happen in the world ever. Like the next one will be a long time away. So just remember to wear your safety glasses, I suppose, if you're going to do that. But yeah, it's a wild time. And I don't even, you know, we were talking before we came on the air, like, where do we even start? I think you have to start with the Calipari news that came last night. And that is that he's going to Arkansas. And all I can say, my first reaction to that is, you deserve this, Kentucky fan. Like, you got your wish. With a lot of you anyway. You made him so miserable there. They couldn't afford to fire him. So you made him so miserable that he was like, yeah, I'll go to Arkansas. And Arkansas is a great job. Look, we talked about this Friday as it related to Jerome Tang, and that news intensified as we were on the air. My initial reaction to it with Wyatt Thompson was, I don't think that he would go, but it's definitely one I'm worried about. And then you know, about 10 minutes after we get off the air, we hear, all right, he's at the top of their list. Well, what does that mean? That means he's at the top of their list. Are they at the top of his list? And then you hear that he's meeting with them, and it's like, okay. And, you know, I was trying to make my way through the day and talking to people about it and a lot of K-State fans. And I'm like, I don't know, guys. Like, he's obviously interested if he's taking the interview. And at the time it was, but the most interesting thing is and I think this was, and my point on this was like, this, I think long-term will tell us a lot. If he gives K-State a chance to come back in and match whatever, that's probably a really, really good sign for his long-term future, because we know of, you know, some animosity perhaps in the offseason with Naquan Tomlin. And that's exactly what happened. So I'm like, listen, this is the best thing that could have ever happened to K-State, right? He's telling you, K-State fan, that he wants to still be in Manhattan. Wyatt pointed out that he moved his parents up there recently. If he comes back and lets Kansas State counter, then that means he wants to be there, because he could have just gone to Arkansas. So that's eventually plays itself out. And we'll have more on that in just a little bit. But it's like, okay, well, then Arkansas is still sitting there. I'm like, man, Arkansas is a really good job. Like, I don't know that people realize like how good a basketball job that is. Musselman left. Musselman is a West Coast guy, goes back to the West Coast. Arkansas draws, you know, like 16 to 20,000 people a night. Great part of the country, great fan base. Certainly going to have the resources there, as we now know, to do good things. And then it just sort of sits there and you're like, okay, who are they going to go to now? And then boom, last night it's John Calipari. And I laughed. I'm like, Kentucky fans, you deserve this. Like, you deserve every second of this. And it's not to say that Kentucky won't go find someone awesome. I think they probably will. But man, like you ran John Calipari out of town, essentially. And that's what happened. And now he's got a buddy with a bunch of money at Arkansas. And there we go. John Calipari with the Hoggies.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about that Arkansas job is that if you are over a certain age, you remember the Nolan Richardson days. You remember the days when, Arkansas was dominant in college basketball and they were competing for national championships consistently. It hasn't been that way for a while at Arkansas. I think Eric Musselman brought them back to relevance, but that was never a perfect fit because of Musselman's West Coast ties and all of that, and going to an SEC school never really seemed like it was the perfect fit for Musselman. What kind of alternate universe are we living in where John Calipari is the third choice for Arkansas? It goes Chris Beard, it goes Jerome Tang, and then it goes John Calipari, right? Like, yeah, it's wild the way that this whole thing played out.
I don't think he's the third choice. I think this came together in the after. Like, I think if you stacked them up, I don't think he would have been the third choice. I think it just is this weird sequence of events. And all of a sudden, John Calipari's the coach. And it's very strange. Good for Arkansas, because I hated that Musselman left. Not any animosity to Musselman. I don't care about that. I just mean, he had them headed back in the right direction. I think it's a really cool basketball program. I think it's a really underrated basketball program. Always have. You'll remember when Musselman got hired, maybe one coach behind. Greg Marshall was a widely considered candidate for that. And at the time, I naively was like, he's not leaving for Arkansas. There were a lot of people that were like, Arkansas is a really good job. Like, look it up. And I did. And I'm like, okay. They support the program. I still didn't think he was going to leave for Arkansas. There were other better jobs that didn't leave for. I was like, okay. And then I've sort of watched, and now they get back to this resurgence. They have a great arena, all of these things. And it would have made sense for Jerome Tang if he was unhappy at K-State. It's a great job. It's a nice job for John Calipari, honestly. Like, if he's sick of hearing it from fans, like, I'll never understand. I mean, look at Matt Painter right now, right? Worst loss maybe ever in the NCAA tournament, into the national championship the next year. The NCAA tournament is such a crapshoot that to bind coaches to their NCAA tournament success is a really, to me, just absolutely silly thing to do. You have to look at the totality of this. You have to look at and start with what kind of players are coming in there, right? Then you have to look at how do those players develop over the season? How many wins are they winning in good leagues during the season? And then whatever happens in the tournament, like, yeah, you want to make runs into the tournament. I get it. And the success hadn't been there for them recently. But, man, you're playing with fire when you start to have that sort of standard there. Look at Memphis and Penny Hardaway. Should Memphis fire Penny Hardaway? No. And that is a level of success. They're not even reaching the NCAA tournament a lot of the time. But you have to be able to start with, can my coach get players in here in this new era? Because if you can't do that, you're toast, right? In the modern basketball era.
The issue with Calipari is that if you are paying him that kind of money and you are basically having him occupy a seat in most, if not the most prestigious chair in college basketball, the head coach at Kentucky, and you're getting bounced in the first round or the second round of the NCAA tournament consistently. I mean, as we all know, it's a world of what have you done for me lately? And I'm not going to suggest that Calipari, is somehow excused from all of that. But at the same time, I think that it's important that you've got to make sure that you are not only getting the players in this new era, but the whole name of the game, the whole goal is to win national championships. That's why they bring you in there. And how long has it been since John Calipari has legitimately competed for a national championship at Kentucky? Now, you can look back at his resume and you can look at all the Final Fours he's been to, the national title games, the championships he's won. You can look at all of that, and that's all well and good. He's a Hall of Fame coach. But if you're Kentucky and you are wanting to compete at the highest level every single year, year in and year out, what's happened recently with John Calipari is not acceptable. I was an advocate after they got bounced by I was an advocate after they got bounced in the first round by Oakland. I thought Mitch Barnhart, the athletic director at Kentucky, should have fired John Calipari and should have paid that buyout. I said it on this show because if it's great that you can make players ready for the NBA, it's great that you can recruit, it's great that you can do all these things, but you're hired there at Kentucky to win national championships. That's the difference between a program like Kentucky and where Penny Hardaway is and where John Calipari was at Memphis. Penny Hardaway is getting players to go to the pros. Like, that's the difference. Kentucky, it's a legendary historic program. The coach there better compete for national championships basically every single year.
How many times in the last 6 seasons do you think Bill Self's made it to the second week of the NCAA tournament?
In the last 6 years?
The last 6 years.
Well, one of those years was the COVID canceled tournament. So that doesn't count. And he had the best team in America that year.
Okay, so that doesn't count against Cal either, who won the SEC that year.
Okay. I'm not suggesting that it does, but I'm saying you can't hold that against anybody because of, the circumstances there. Excluding that, maybe twice in the last 6 years.
One time in 6 years they've made it through, which of course was a national championship, right?
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting anything Bill Self would ever be in danger. Bill Self in the last 6 seasons has reached the second week of the NCAA tournament exactly one time. One time. And there would never be any of these conversations. John Calipari was in the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 in that same amount of time and had his COVID year canceled. The problem, I get it, is the NCAA tournament the last 4, but they were second, third, and second. They had one really bad year in 2020, right after the COVID year. It was a bad year. Other than that, they finished second, third, and second in the SEC. He's won 75% of his games at Kentucky in the SEC. He has a national championship. He's got 3 other Elite 8s. He's got a Final 4. He's got a national champion runner-up in there. He's won 75% of his games.
Who'd they lose to in the tournament a couple of weeks ago in the first round? What school beat them in the first round? Oakland University. Who beat them? Was it the 15 seed over the 2? Was it St. Peter that beat them? When was that? 2 years ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago? So he's got that on his resume too. Like that, I'm not debating the effectiveness of John Calipari as a coach, but it's been pretty clear to see that the union between John Calipari and Kentucky got to a level where it wasn't sustainable.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with
so
that.
That's why I was an advocate for Mitch Barnhart to make a move with John Calipari after this season. It wasn't because I think John Calipari is a scrub.
So
it wasn't because I don't think Calipari is a great coach.
Deserved to be fired based on the performance on the court.
I'm saying both sides needed a break. Both teams, both sides needed to make a fresh start.
Clearly they did. Clearly they did because he just left for Arkansas. Like that, yes, I will agree with that. What I laugh at is Kentucky fans that think he wasn't doing a good enough job. And that's absurd. Could you imagine that same standard being held elsewhere in the country? And I get Kentucky's a high, but look at the next best job, Kansas, right? And you can put Duke and Carolina in there. That's fine. I don't really care. But what I'm trying to point out is the absurdity of trying to tether a coach to only the NCAA tournament success of recent years. Virginia, nobody gets bounced like Virginia, but they got a national championship with Bennett, right? How long did it take Jay Wright to get there? It's an incredibly difficult tournament to win in. It's what makes Gonzaga's run right now remarkable. The amount of times they've been into the second weekend. Bill Self, who in my opinion is the best in the business, has reached the second weekend of the NCAA tournament one time in 6 years. To hold these coaches to the standard of they have to win all these NCAA tournament games, it's insane. That's insanity.
But don't you think that it might be insanity overall, but you're talking about a fan base, an entire organization that is different because it's a blue blood, like Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, North Carolina? Are those expectations year in and year out acceptable? Are they out of reach? Probably. They're probably, I think that you could probably ask anybody and they would say, okay, yeah, that your program should at least compete for a national championship every single year is probably crazy. But I would say those four teams and those four fan bases overall, yeah, those expectations are the reality. It's the reality that you should be competing for that. And I think that probably part of what was John Calipari's major downfall at Kentucky over the last several years has been that he's been on record and he's been very vocal about the fact that in his mind, his job is to get players ready for the NBA. If you want to be an NBA player, come and play for Coach Cal at Kentucky. And I think that flies in the face overall of the fan base's expectations with it being a blue blood. Those expectations are compete for a national championship every single year, NBA be damned. That doesn't matter overall to the fan base. And I think that if you looked at whether they're right or wrong, whether
they're
it's,
wrong.
Not
they're wrong.
But I think they're
I'll
looking
draw
at this
that
and saying,
line in the
hey,
sand.
great. Hey, John Calipari, it's nice that you're bringing in these future pros to our team and to our university, but we're getting bounced in the first round. That's not acceptable.
What do you
Who
think?
cares what they do at the next level?
I understand, but what do you think is going to happen when those players aren't coming there? That's my point. Like, if he's the best at getting players and he's in the mix, start and finish the conversation.
I'm just telling you the way it is. I'm telling you.
I understand what you're saying. I'm saying they're wrong. I'm saying the fans are lunatics for thinking that. Mark Few, and I know Gonzaga is not Kentucky. I'm just, again, tying and tethering your program to the success of the tournament. In his first 15 years, Mark Few couldn't get past the Sweet 16, and only did that 4 times in 15 years did he make it to the second weekend. Okay? What if they just, get a taste of success and like, that's not good enough. We're not winning enough tournament games. I mean, again, like, you have to think about this and just the reality of how crazy that is. Yeah, Cal had a bad stretch in tournament games. In those years, though, he was second, third, and second in the SEC. That's a great basketball league. Like, you have to look at the totality of this or you're going to get burned. We see it all the time. Go ask UCLA. Go ask Indiana. Like, sometimes you just have to be,
and it's a cautionary
really
tale
and frustrated.
I think Kentucky, and I think that this is the right move overall for both sides, because I don't think that the relationship was tenable. And I think that, barring some kind of major successful run next season, I think that Calipari was probably out anyway. So I do think this was probably the right move ultimately for both sides. But if I'm Kentucky, you have to let Indiana be a cautionary tale, because look at where they've been ever since Bob Knight left. And I think everybody considered them a blue blood. Are they anymore? Are they? They're not.
Ooh, Kentucky?
So, no, Indiana.
Yeah.
Like, you need to let Indiana be a cautionary tale.
Yeah,
if you're
exactly. Rob, real quick, Rob pointed out something very good to the Bill Self thing. He didn't coach last year in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
His team did not advance. He did not coach. That is a great point. And I'm not trying to do anything. I think Bill Self's the best in the business. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm saying if other great programs held this same ridiculous standard of the only thing that matters is advancing to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, there would be a lot of Hall of Fame, best in the business coaches that wouldn't have a job anymore. And it's ridiculous to me that Kentucky fans are doing this, have run him out of town. Now and we'll talk about what's next for them, because I do think it, sort of involves somebody we're paying attention to. But you better be careful what you wish for. When you've got a guy that's in the top 2 or 3 of a league every single year, bringing in the best NBA talent in the country you could make a case for every single year, better be careful what you wish for.
I think they can upgrade, though. I think there are a couple of names out there that would actually be an upgrade from John Calipari. I really do.
And I cannot believe I'm defending John Calipari. Let me say that too, because in game, I don't think he's like at the top. I just you got to start with getting the best players, and he's always done that. I don't know where I would rank him or anything like that. Like in game, I don't think he is. I don't know that he's gotten enough out of these teams. I just, in this really uncertain time of college basketball and getting players, to run him out of town seems very risky to me. We'll continue it going. Man, boy, what a bombshell last night. 869-1240. Bombshell if you're college basketball fans like we are on this show. It's an interesting conversation, and it probably needs to intensify the concern for K-State fans who we thought we were through this. We'll talk about Jerome Tang's role in all of it when we return on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you on this Monday morning. Mornings at KFH. Staff enjoys a great cup of coffee from Prairie Fire Coffee. Always appreciate Prairie Fire's really delicious coffee there in studio, keeping us ready to roll here, and it is a good morning ready to roll. I think we got some natural energy from the news late night of John Calipari. I'm with you, Tom. He kept me up later than I thought I would. I was ready to be in bed like a normal human, much more normal human hours than I normally stay up, and then that dropped, and I'm like, well, there goes that bedtime, and then you stay up with it a little bit. John Calipari going to Arkansas. This is all very interesting because Arkansas looked like a real threat to pull away Jerome Tang. Jerome Tang gets a new contract from Kansas State. I have not seen the details on that yet. I'm sure they're out there, but I haven't seen them. We were at the school event on Friday night as this is happening, and a lot of K-State fans are trying to watch it. They're very nervous, and I'm like, I think nervous is appropriate here if he's interviewing for the job, but it kept saying the same thing. If he gives K-State, Tommy, a chance to counter here, that's going to be not just good for this situation, obviously, but I think good in the big picture of what it means for Jerome Tang's future. And we had been joking about this whole thing, not joking. I mean, it's not a joke. It was serious about his real interest in Arkansas. And I'm like, man, he'll go to Arkansas, and in 2 years, he'll be the coach at Kentucky, right? And then he stays, everything settles through. And then all of a sudden now we get Cal going to Arkansas. And I'm like, well, I don't think there's anybody that watches college basketball, especially in this part of the world, that would argue that Jerome Tang would be an incredible coach at Kentucky, right? I think we could take 100 calls, and 100 people, even if they're the biggest K-State haters in the world, would see that and be like, yeah, that'd be a really good fit. Now, Kentucky fans may not feel the same way. You got a guy that's reached the NCAA tournament 1 or 2 years. He's been a head coach for 2 years. I think there is safety in this for a couple of reasons, Tommy. One, Kentucky, if Cal left because the fans ran him out, I'm not sure they would ever give Jerome Tang the appropriate respect right out of the gates. Unless this hiring cycle went totally sideways on Kentucky, then maybe, but that's not going to happen. Kentucky will go find a really good coach. They don't have to now worry about the financial component of firing Cal. So they'll, be able to go pay a coach a ton of money. And that's kind of where you start, I guess. But they're going to have a list of elites that they'll work their way through before they ever even got to Jerome Tang. He would be a great fit there. It's really odd how all of this stuff has happened now. What a wild, what are we at? 72 hours since Friday when he was catching real interest for that job.
Jerome Tang is not going to be the coach at Kentucky. I'll tell you that right now. And it's not because he's not a great basketball coach. I just think that there are a lot of other candidates that are higher profile that Kentucky's going to go after. Keep in mind that this is the largest, biggest, most intriguing and powerful job opening in college basketball in 15 years, probably when Calipari took the Kentucky job
that has
back in
a
2009.
Real chance because Duke and Carolina went internal.
They went internal.
That has a real
exactly.
Open market.
Yep.
Okay.
When Roy Williams and Coach K retired, they already had their successors in place. Yeah. So this is going to have the eyes of college basketball nationally on it. And Kentucky, with the resources they have, the ability to pay a coach, NIL, all of those things, it's not going to be Jerome Tang. I agree with you. I think Jerome Tang would be a good fit. It's not going to happen, though. But there is, I think, still a reason for Kansas State fans to at least pay attention to this. Yeah. Because the betting favorite currently right now, I just looked it up, Scott Drew at Baylor is the betting favorite currently to replace John Calipari at Kentucky. If that happens, that's where Jerome Tang came from, was Baylor. He's part of the Scott Drew coaching tree. Jerome Tang spent a number of years under Scott Drew at Baylor, and it could be extremely enticing for Jerome Tang to go back home to Baylor, where, Arkansas, there really wasn't a connection there. There really wasn't a reason. Like, I understand that he was interested and there was mutual interest and they were interviewing, but from an emotional standpoint, and Jerome Tang has been on record multiple times saying that, it for him, like, it's more than just about the money and that sort of thing. It's about feeling like he's in the right place. He's a man of faith. He's talked about how God will move him in different directions, that sort of thing. And I think there could be an appeal for him to go back home to Baylor if Baylor wanted to go that direction, if Scott Drew ends up being the guy at Kentucky.
Of course there would. I think there are two jobs right now that would worry you as a K-State fan, and that's Baylor and Kentucky. Don't forget, Jerome Tang beat Kentucky last year, sort of a part of this. So Kentucky fans know who he is. They're paying attention to him. Again, that would have to go sideways. What I can't figure out in all of this, because I've seen the same Scott Drew stuff too, and you pay attention to betting favorites. Why? Because there was noise about Scott Drew going to Louisville too, and I'm like, what has ever happened that makes anybody think Scott Drew would want to leave Baylor? That's what I don't understand in all of this, right? Scott Drew has been one of the top guys for every job in the world for a long time.
The Louisville job didn't make any sense. And he ultimately ended up parlaying that into an extension and a raise with Baylor. That might have been part of it. Part of the reason why there was
got an extension and a raise.
He did. Yeah, he just got an extension and a raise because he was linked to the Louisville job, and apparently there was mutual interest there. That being said, though, I mean, I think that for a guy like Scott Drew, there could be an appeal of going to the SEC, jumping ship to being in one of the top two major conferences with, I guarantee you, and the thing that's tough about Baylor is that it's a private university, so it's hard to know exactly all the financials, but you better believe that there would be more money for him at a program like Kentucky than there is at Baylor. There's probably a larger pool of NIL dollars at Kentucky than there is at Baylor, and probably an opportunity to be one of if not the highest paid coach in college basketball if he goes to Kentucky.
So that's the only appeal, I would say, because they're getting NBA guys now at a click and at a level that rivals anybody. Baylor recruits now, especially with the portal, at a level that is at near every team in the country. That's what has always been interesting to me. The other thing is there has always seemed to be, think about what he has done there, Tommy. Like, think about what Scott Drew has done at Baylor, what he inherited and where they are now. That's the part of it for me. I guess money always talks, but what are we doing here? He could increase his salary greatly if he made what Calipari made. Greatly, by 50% or so or more. So I guess I get that, but my goodness, if you've accomplished what he's accomplished there, and I don't want to think that, look, there's also let me go take a swing at this job because there's a challenge to it. I also have a pretty good idea of what Baylor would then try to do, right? And what I've built here. If I handed that right off to my buddy, okay. I get all that. And I think that's reality because, again, I think sometimes we have to put ourselves in these situations and just think about them as real humans, right? Like, why would Coach Cal leave Kentucky? Real human doesn't feel wanted there. He's like, all right, fine, I'm leaving. Like all of that. So I get it. And I'm with you.
It could be a fresh start here. Not that Scott Drew he's done a great job at Baylor, but he's been there for 20 years, and there could be the appeal of going and coaching for a blue blood. What he did in turning around Baylor is incredibly remarkable. If you go back and look at where Baylor was when he took over that program, it's insane. And he's a national championship winning coach. I think that there could be an appeal of a new challenge in a larger conference with more dollars and, being able to end your career at a blue blood type thing. I can see that being an appeal for Scott Drew. I also think that, and I mentioned it before the break, that there are a couple of names out there that I think could be upgrades from John Calipari. I don't know if Scott Drew is. I think that's maybe more, not that I don't think Scott Drew is great. That might be more of a lateral move for Kentucky as far as like a step up. But there's a couple of names out there that if I'm Mitch Barnhart, I'm calling just to see if there's any interest. And those names are Dan Hurley, Not going to happen. He's going to stay at UConn, but I think you make the call, especially if they win tonight and they're back-to-back national champions.
I wouldn't say it's not going to happen.
I
Remember
think,
how he left Providence.
I think you make that call and see if he's interested in talking about it. I think you call Nate Oates at Alabama and see if he's interested in that. The buyout's pretty large, but remember, they didn't have to pay a John Calipari buyout, so they've got that money. And then I think you call Jay Wright and say, hey, Jay, are you content with retirement? Are you happy being retired? Would you like to come to Kentucky? And I think if he wants to get back into it, that could be a place for him where it would work out pretty well.
I don't call Jay Wright because he got out because I think he was tired of what's happening as much as anything, and he doesn't want to deal with that. So I would be absolutely concerned at his level of commitment to what it now takes to get players in there. So I wouldn't call Jay Wright. He also wasn't getting the level of player that Kentucky is accustomed to getting. He was just a great coach, right? And they were recruiting at a high level there toward the end of his run, but I don't think he steps away if he's not like I don't want to do that. Right. So I wouldn't reach out to him if I was Kentucky. I wouldn't have interest in that.
And I mentioned those names, and here are some other names that are, on the betting lines and all of that. So, and this is an order of betting favorite onward down. Scott Drew, Nate Oates, Richard Pitino, which obviously Rick coached there for a long time. Richard Pitino is third as far as a betting favorite is concerned at 7-1. Billy Donovan, who spent time at Kentucky for a long time. He's with the Bulls now, hasn't been in college for a long time. He's 9-1. Mark Pope at BYU. Kelvin Sampson, which I don't see that happening. He's 12-1.
Same thing as Scott Drew to me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Kelvin Sampson's a guy that, he's got it rolling at Houston, and he's probably fairly close to retirement. So just let it ride and enjoy your time.
Scott Drew's like 61 now.
Nah, I think he's younger than that, isn't he? He's got to be in his 50s.
I would think so.
He was pretty young, I think, when he took over Baylor. Sean Miller is 16-1. Jamie Dixon is 16-1.
I know he's 53. I was way off.
Yeah. Chris Beard is 18-1.
Chris Beard might be the first call I make. Just FYI, if I'm Kentucky, I'm not. I'd really have to think about that. I don't know how to rank them. I don't think it would be Scott Drew for me. He inherited the death penalty essentially, right? And it took a minute. It took a few seasons, but he got them turned around. And now, to me, like they're one of the premier programs in the country. I think I don't talk to Scott Drew about it, but man, like the fit there seems so perfect. That's equivalent for me of saying like Mark Few is going to leave Gonzaga. It's too perfect. There are other names on the list. I would, you know who else I'd call? Brad Underwood for sure.
97.5
and there are other names on the list. I don't know where they'll go. Now all I care about is does it involve Jerome Tang in any way? So I just want them to hire somebody else. I don't want them to hire Scott Drew.
I think it only involves Jerome Tang if Scott Drew gets that call.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, Kentucky, they hired Cal from Memphis, right? So it's not like, Jerome Tang would be, to me, I think he's being undersold as a candidate. If they have to have the best group of people involved in this, right? And I still got to think Tang is at the height of a lot of lists. Now, again, he just took his raise. That would be a bad look. I don't know that I don't know that they'll get that far down their list. I don't think that they will because I'm not sure that's what the fans would want. But you going to take Richard Pitino over Jerome Tang? Like if you had the ability to take either, I think you're nuts.
I think the only thing that is going to move Jerome Tang from Kansas State is an emotional tie to a program. If he didn't leave to go to Arkansas, I know it's Kentucky, and I don't think that Kentucky's going to go after him. But I do think that if there is an opening at a place where there's an emotional tie, Baylor there obviously is. He spent 20 years there. That would be the only place I'd be nervous about.
I just need Tang to be at K-State for a few more years minimum. Like, I want to see these recruiting classes come up. Last year, they were handcuffed by the Tomlin thing. Like, I just want to see what can be built in Manhattan. I do. It's like Leipold at Kansas football, right? Like, maybe it's inevitable that at some point it happens. Just don't happen yet. Let this thing build up a little bit. We went through this with Kleiman at K-State, and then Klein was there, and it's like, okay, well, I guess let's just can we just pause? Give us a minute here, coaching cycle. Can we just have a minute to enjoy these things, please? 869-1240. We'll take your calls on it. Lots still to come. We got to talk about that women's national championship game yesterday. We got to talk about the Royals, who appear to be really good, and probably more about this, I would guess, because it is fascinating when something like that happens. 869-1240. You can leave us your comments on our streams. We'll be back more Sports Daily after this.
The commercials are over.
Yo, I haven't got all day.
869-1240.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
This portion of the program brought to you by Crestview Country Club. Glad to have them on board with the program this year. It's almost Masters time, Tommy. I know Crestview does a bunch of cool and fun stuff with the Masters, not just watching it, of course. You got a couple golf courses and a bunch of crazy golf fans. It is an interesting time up at the club. Getting some weather back in our favor. Maybe not the wind. You'd have had to play Texas Panhandle golf this. That's what I like to call it this past weekend, which is just hit it low and like on the ground to keep it out of the wind. But it is almost Masters time. It's golf season, and Crestview's as good a place in town as any to play, watch, consume, enjoy, be around people that love golf.
Yeah, it's my favorite week of the year. I love Masters Week. We're getting closer to that tournament starting on Thursday, the par 3 contest on Wednesday. And I know that Crestview, as you mentioned, like they do quite a bit around the Masters. I think they're doing like a special Masters dinner with like inspired dishes from what John Rahm, who won the Masters last year, what he is putting on the Champions Dinner, a lot of like Spanish inspired dishes and things like that. They do a Masters golf tournament where you can go out there and play. So a lot of different things that are related to what is, in my opinion, the best weekend in golf. And like you mentioned, they do it really well out there at Crestview.
Yeah, it's a great place to be this time of year. Get out there, check it out, ask them about it. We're both out there. We love it. We really enjoy our time. I was at the racetrack this weekend, real quick, Tommy. I didn't really know Oklahoma City had a horse race track. I had a cousin running a horse out there. He won his race, by the way. It was really exciting.
Nice.
But we went. My kids are there. They loved it. It was awesome. And, you know, I've got great pictures of my kids like holding their dollars and everything. I did that as a kid with my parents. You know, you'd go and they'd let you pick your horses and they'd put it on there. But we're talking about, you know, the Masters and, you know, all these bets and stuff. My kids, it's in their blood, man. I knew it would be. Like, they loved it. They had such a great time.
That's awesome.
Check it out. It was fun. We burned down, burned back. They handled it. It was a tired morning today, but started the races at night. I get 6 o'clock, and of course, my cousin's horse is in the last race. I'm like, oh, my kids are gonna be up till midnight. Sure, you can have some more chocolate cake. we're gonna have to get you going. Mom wasn't on this trip, by the way, as we're talking about, you know, my kids learning how to wager and eating all the sugar they want. Mom wasn't there.
You're a great influence on them.
That's dad trip. That was a dad trip. It was great though. It was fun. All right, so coming up in the second hour, we're gonna have a giveaway for you. We'll give away some HTO. We're going to get into the Royals. We're going to get into the national championship game tonight, certainly. And we're going to talk about last night's, I guess it was yesterday afternoon's national championship. A lot to get to in this second hour. So keep your fingers ready for the giveaways and to chime in at 869-1240. Thank you for watching on our video streams. If you ever want to comment, even if you're listening, you just find those video streams. You can leave us messages there that we see here. And so it's almost as good as calling if you're not able to just call us outright. That's on Facebook, on YouTube, on X. Just go and find that stream there. We'll get to all of that. A lot to get to in this second hour. We're going to do it. We'll take our break now. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, hour number 2 coming up.
I'm Ted, the Sports Head!
Now, from Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH. This is Sports Daily with Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor.
ESPN Bet ready to take you through all the huge sports moments this spring. The exclusive sports book of ESPN has it all, including exclusive offers and promotions from Scott Van Pelt and Stephen A. Smith, from the playoff intensity to getting on the links and out to the ballpark. There's no better time to be sports fans. Sign up today, and new users get $100 in bonus bets for making any sportsbook bet. Download ESPN Bet today. What a play. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In partnership with Hollywood Casino at Kansas Speedway. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details. We welcome you back into hour number 2 of Sports Daily, and we do get things started with a national championship game tonight. Speaking of betting, you've got UConn as 6.5-point favorites over Purdue. You've got an over-under of 144.5 right now, according to ESPN Bet. Tommy, as we look at this and we look forward to this game, neither of the games in the semifinal were particularly interesting on the men's side. They were on the women's side. But as we look at it tonight, where are you leaning on this? Connecticut, Purdue, the two best teams. I'll say throw Houston in there, 2 of the 3 best teams we saw all year, most of the year. Where are you sitting tonight, and how do you have this one?
Yeah, I think UConn wins the game, and I don't think that they're going to be in a position where I think that they'll cover. Let me just say that I think they'll cover that number. They're not going to win by a ton like they have beaten every other team, I think, in America, because Purdue is outstanding. But I do think that UConn wins the game. I think they cover the number. I think they probably win by 8 points or so. Overall, I think that obviously it's going to be incredible to watch Zach Edey take on Donovan Clingan and, just that matchup down in the post. And I think Edey will absolutely get his and Purdue will hang around. It's going to be a punch, counter punch type game. But I do think that we're on a collision course to have UConn repeat as national champions.
Yeah, I do too. I don't know that I think it will be as close as you do. I don't want it to be. I want to root for Purdue so badly. It's going to be hard for me because I think the bet is UConn to cover. I don't love either side of the over-under. Both of these teams are capable of, high-scoring affairs. Both of these teams are capable of slugfest that don't get over, 125. So I don't particularly like that. I think the bet for sure is UConn minus 6.5. My personal dilemma will be, I don't want to bet something I don't want to root for. And so it's always hard to make that distinction, right? In your fandom, how do you do that? Because I really don't want to bet UConn, but I think they're the bet. I think that they're better.
It's been the bet all tournament. It's been the bet all tournament.
It's been the
for
bet
them to
for
cover.
2 years in the tournament.
It's I wonder, and
I've been 15 now. It's ridiculous.
I haven't done the math, but if you're looking at just this tournament alone, if you took, I don't know, $20 on the opening game for UConn to
doubled
cover
it down,
and you just rolled it over every single game on that bet, you'd probably have made quite a bit of money over the course of the tournament because they always cover. They always cover the numbers.
Yeah.
So it absolutely, I think, in my mind, is the bet for UConn to cover. I think they do. I think they, as bullish as I've been on UConn throughout this tournament and me saying that I think that they're going to go back to back, I've said it several different times. I don't think it's going to be a blowout because I do think that Zach Edey and Purdue, I think that they're really good and they're on after what happened last year. I just don't think that Zach Edey alone can do it. And I do think that UConn will overpower them, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout.
I don't know how I define blowout, but I think it could be 10 points. 6.5 feels fine to me. I really love this Purdue story. I love a big like Zach Edey going old school. And we just saw a big in the women's tournament last night be the reason South Carolina dominated that game. I mean, the rebounding in that game was absurd, and we'll talk about it in a second, but it's sort of this revolution for the big man. in the college game or the big woman. And I love it. The post player, the center, right? Like I think that's really cool. And Zach Edey's the 2-time player of the year. And I don't know if it's going to be enough because UConn has a ton of size. And then it's like, okay, if they can neutralize Zach Edey in some way, and I think that they probably can, then what? And then I just think UConn's better the rest of the way. So, I'm with you. I think that's the bet. I don't know that I will bet it because I don't want to root for it. I'll find something else to bet. I'll keep, banging the drum of the Rangers on plus money, probably. Good teams that get plus money in baseball. The Royals, unfortunately, aren't playing. They've been a great bet for a while here in baseball. So I'll find other ways to attack it, and we'll see. But you can find it. Let's talk about that women's game for a second, Tommy. South Carolina, we said this, or I think we've collectively said this. I certainly have. Like South Carolina has been, and I totally understand why, and there's nothing wrong with it. South Carolina has been far and away the best team in college basketball on the women's side all year. It's not, but like way better than everybody. I mean, they're unbeaten, right? And they're unbeaten and they're dominant and they're running this thing through. And how do you not love Dawn Staley and the way that like they're just too much to handle? And so Iowa, who it was kind of like, Caitlin Clark has to be out of her mind good, and she was for a little bit in that game, but it wasn't enough. And I think the South Carolina run is awesome. Dawn Staley is as fun to root for as any coach at any level because she appreciates it so much. She takes time to appreciate the right people. Somebody was telling me there was a session as the women's game has exploded this year. And this is like, to me, it's like a Bill Self thing to do. There was like this moment where she really appreciated all her local media and everybody that's kind of been with them as they're embracing the magnitude of this thing. She took time on the stage of winning the title last year to make sure to go back with Holly Rowe and appreciate what Caitlin Clark has done for the game this year. And that's as you're winning a national championship. So love Dawn Staley. Easy for me to root for South Carolina. Got no issue with them being a juggernaut. I wanted Iowa to win because I like to see it mixed up a little bit, but it's okay. It was an incredible run. My daughter was invited to a watch party with some of her friends yesterday. Like all of that is so cool. I hope that the momentum continues. I hope that, somebody follows Caitlin Clark's footsteps and captivates us the same way that she and Angel Reese did the last couple of years. Certainly. It's just like this perfect collision course of everything. Her style of play, first and foremost, I think. It's the Steph Curry effect. That's what I keep comparing to. Is she the greatest women's player of all time? I don't think so. She's certainly in the conversation, but it's the Steph Curry effect. Changing the game, captivating us because we see something we haven't seen before. That's the Caitlin Clark effect. You remember when Steph Curry started lighting it up? How captivated we were by him. Like it was just like, it was mesmerizing. That's what happened for me this year. That's what happened. It was that we just couldn't believe what we were seeing. The things you want to scream at a player for, like, what are you doing? Don't take that shot. And by the end of it, you're like, oh yeah, that's her shot. Like she's totally logo 3. Yeah, that's right in her bag.
But I do think though, that there's been this thought from a lot of people that, this year and in the last couple of years, I've seen people say, oh, finally, there's entertainment value in women's basketball. That's always been there. It's always been there. You just haven't really looked at it. You haven't watched. You haven't watched. And have there been players in women's basketball like Caitlin Clark? Probably not exactly like her, but that doesn't mean that there hasn't been entertainment value in the past. I mean, she has changed the game in the same way that Steph Curry did. But, there are so many different other captivating things in college basketball. If people were solely watching women's basketball for Caitlin Clark, then that's one thing. But there are other storylines that are so incredible. You add in Angel Reese and you add in the villain in Kim Mulkey, and then you add in just the legend of UConn women's basketball, and they're still in it, and still mixing it up in the Final Four. And oh, by the way, South Carolina and Dawn Staley, undefeated run to the national championship. Everything came together in a way that I will say I'm not sure it's ever come together before like this. There's been entertainment value, absolutely, but the stars have aligned where you've got really top tier recognizable stars in the women's game with really top tier recognizable coaches and really top tier recognizable programs all coming together all in the same year. And it's been incredible to watch.
I was talking to somebody over the weekend, I think at like a kid's soccer game or something, just that was captivated by it. And I tell people all the I said this a lot in the last couple of weeks. Like, I don't want what I don't like is some guilt factor of people like, oh, you're not watching it.
Yeah.
Why? Like, oh, do you hate women? Like, what are you doing? No, like we all have limited time to watch things, right? Like for me, I have watched less now that our teams are out of either of the NCAA tournaments because I'm watching baseball right now. Like we have I have a team personally that I love and adore defending a championship, and the Royals are all of a sudden good. Like that, I'm kind of watching that right now. And then I'm also trying to watch the other stuff. But the point, like, we all have limited watching time. What I think is so cool in what's happening now, it's not that there's like this social movement, which is what I think a lot of people want to point to and be like, oh, it's, like finally, like what has taken. So it's like, no, guys, like stop. If you haven't come up with really awesome, emotionally impactful women's basketball or anything, fill in the blank here, you're not going to just watch it because why? Like what's happened is there's this player, she's water cooler talk. Everybody's talking about it, right? She's breaking records. She's on commercials. The NIL is changing the game because we are seeing these women's athletes front and center now, which I think is, what a lot of people are trying to appreciate, like Dawn Staley.
Sure.
Like, we appreciate the fact that just the platform is there now through other things. And what I think people are finding, and it's not because they're overridden by some guilt or some social commentary. It's like, no, man, that basketball's good. And I've said to people for years, like, if you're like me, like I'll watch the national championship game tonight. Purdue and UConn. High level, fast pace. I'm going to be brutally honest with you, and I'll be honest where some people probably wouldn't be, and they'll pretend like they understand everything that's happening on the court. I'm not going to understand everything that's happening on the court strategically. What the different kinds of screens and cuts and like, I'm enjoying the game at a most basic level for the emotional enjoyment and all that stuff. Like 90% of us out there watching. I think there was an NBA insider that lectured people on they don't want the ins and outs and the X's and O's. You're right. We don't want that. Like we want to just like have an emotional connection with the game. But I've said this forever about the women's game. If you love the strategy and the X's and O's and you want to see like execution and you want to be able to process it a little better, it's a better place for you. It's a better place for me. I grew up in a place where women's basketball was massive. Move here at the high school level, it's massive. I want it to get back there at the collegiate level. But it's like a different viewing experience. And that's the sentiment I'm getting from people. They're like, yeah, man, I can better understand like what coaches are doing and what players are doing and all these things. And so I love it. And I do think that it has opened the eyes. I don't know if it'll trickle up to the WNBA. I don't know where it will trickle. I have no idea. Caitlin Clark will probably be what people follow. And, the burden that she bears is a great one and she handles it well and more power to her. But what I hope it does is in these arenas where college basketball is happening, people understand like, go, man, it's fun. Like it is fun more than watching on TV. Again, like our time is precious, but just go to these games. Like I can almost promise you when it's played at that level, you're going to have a good time. You're going to enjoy it.
And on the men's side, I've been locked into the tournament the entire way through from start to finish. And I'll watch the game tonight. But you know what would get me even more locked in? If the game didn't start at 8:30 at night. And I know, keep in mind, think about like UConn fans on the East Coast. You're talking 9:30 p.m. on a Monday night, when this game is starting.
I've never
and this is, it's also something that we're not talking about a standard college basketball game that is probably just over 2 hours. You're probably talking about an extended halftime. You're talking about a lot of TV timeouts, things like that. At least here in this part of the country, you're not, it's going to be probably 11 or after 11 by the time.
But imagine
Crown,
yourself
it's
living
like,
on the West Coast. It's 6:20. That's always the dilemma.
Yeah, but
of
you've
these
got
championships.
Purdue and UConn. Like, you don't have a
But
West
they don't
Coast
know
team in
who-
the tournament.
They don't know who they've got before the tournament starts, though. Like, they have no
Bump
idea.
it up an hour. Like, come on, guys. Let's do a 7:30 Central start time.
But you've got a 5:30 start time for one of the largest swaths of population that exists.
What time do we start the Super Bowl? Super Bowl starts at 5:30 local time.
On a Sunday.
I get it. And, the women's national championship game was at 2 p.m. yesterday.
The better argument is don't play the game on a Monday night. We have this problem in college football too. They do the same thing, and they start it super late but stop doing that. Have it on a Sunday. Have it on a Saturday. How about that, college football? Why don't you have the game on the day that everybody watches college football? But yeah, I think I don't know how you do it because you want I would probably say put the semifinal, kind of like they do with the women, I guess. Put the semifinal on a Friday, and the problem is it's a Monday, and you don't want to alienate half your audience on the West Coast. So it's like we got to start it late, and that does suck if you're on the East Coast, even more than it does for us. Like us, we'll be out of that game by 11:30. We'll be out of that game by 11, probably. It's too late. I agree. It is, but unless you're going to move the game to the weekend day, which makes more sense to me, always has. The other thing is too, and I don't think you could do this either. I don't think you could wait a full week between the semifinal and the championship. So the only thing you could really do is either play it back to back, which you don't want to do. You'd have to move the semifinal.
Well, and you've got to get it. You've got to get it done like now because CBS is the partner, and then you get into the Masters and all that.
They're going to have that
in every other
problem
year
too,
it's CBS, and so you're going to run into the Masters coverage and all of that. So I don't know. I hate the fact that it's like
too late.
a Monday night.
I do too.
And I can't even imagine being on the East Coast. And if I'm it's like the payoff. It's the payoff for the entire season of college basketball. And it's not going to end probably until after midnight Tuesday morning.
I know. But I also suppose if you've been watching the NCAA tournament, you're used to that because you are up that late with the late games. But yeah, I'm with you on that. It's unfortunate. It is, but I don't know that there's any way around it. It's a scheduling conflict. I guess if I had to give you like a perfect world, you'd play the semifinal game on Thursday night and then the championship probably on, I mean, you could even wait till Sunday for that, but Saturday or Sunday for sure. Yeah, I think that would be better. So we'll keep an eye on it again. It's a 6.5 point spread. We both like the UConn side of that. I'm going to imagine most of the country likes the UConn side of that, which is, that's been that way for a long time, and they just keep hitting it. So there's your look at the college basketball championship. Let's spend a little time with the Royals here. They don't play today, but we'll spend some time with them as well. On the way out, we'll give away some HTO. You can get a free iced tea at either of the Wichita locations, East or West, or in Derby. You can get a free reign coffee drink, iced hot, however you like it, either in Derby or East Wichita. One of each of those right now to our first caller on the KFH hotline, 869-1240. We'll come back. We'll talk about Royals baseball next on Sports Daily.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
On your way into work, you'll want to keep listening to Sports Daily even after you park the car with the Odyssey app and Odyssey.com. You can just download the app or visit Odyssey.com, search for KFH, download the Odyssey app today, and get started. A place you can also listen to Royals baseball with us also right here on KFH is that Odyssey app. Tommy, we have sort of watched this and waited, and kind of try not to get too excited or too impatient, but I'm going to tell you, the run differential has been really good. The bullpen certainly has questions, but the starting pitching continues to be fantastic. They are getting contributions from a lot of the guys we had concerns about in the lineup. And look, it's a 4-game set with the White Sox that helps, but you sweep that set, and that matters, man. And this is, you're going to catch the Astros coming off of a road series at Texas. They got to then stay on the road and come to Kansas City. Big opportunity beginning tomorrow night. But I think as we look at all of it, it quite simply, the Royals are for real. They have the ability to be a playoff team, I think, to win that division, I think. And man, and it's all the stuff we wanted, right? Like we saw the starting pitching they brought in. We liked the starting. That's not surprising. We thought the starting pitching they brought in was really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's objectively the best rotation in Major League Baseball. I don't even think that can be debated at this point. I mean, it's a very small sample size.
Right.
It's a very small sample size. Yeah, of course. And it may not be the most eye-catching rotation in Major League Baseball. It definitely is not. But as far as statistical quality starts, ERA, all of that, yeah, it's the best rotation through the first couple of weeks of the regular season in Major League Baseball. There's no doubt about that. The bullpen leaves quite a bit to be desired. That's something that they're going to have to continue to figure out. It was good to see Will Smith get at least a decent outing over the weekend. I think from a mental standpoint, a motivational standpoint, that's got to help. He's clearly not going to be the long-term answer. He's not going to be somebody that can be effective throughout the dog days of summer for the Royals, but it was good to see him actually have a quality outing over the weekend, albeit against the White Sox. They're a very unserious team in Major League Baseball. They're probably the worst in Major League Baseball. But that being said, the pitching's been great from a starting pitching perspective. The bats are coming alive. They've been able to come back from behind in games over the weekend. MJ Melendez has been outstanding. Michael Garcia has been outstanding. Of course, Bobby Witt Jr. has been great. Things are coming together early on, and this is what we needed to see. We needed to see them not stumble out of the gate. I was concerned when after the first 6 games, they were 2-4, and all 4 of those losses were winnable games. But then they were able to sweep the White Sox. They've got still a pretty manageable stretch of games coming up this week. They could easily be a team that once we get out of the month of April, if they keep this up, we could be talking legitimate contenders.
I think we are now. You mentioned the rotation. I don't think it is the best rotation in baseball, but I think it has performed that way. And I think
better?
It will.
Who's been
well?
Through the first
what I'm
10
saying
games?
is that's not what I'm saying is if we look at it beyond the first 10 games, of which 4 of them they've pitched against the White Sox. I think if I'm saying like, who do I think has the best rotation in baseball in reality, not just by the numbers through 10 games, I'm not going to say them for that, but I think it definitely has a chance to be in the top 5 in the American League. And that's absolutely going to be good enough. Right. And so it's not that's not that has been the question, right, for this entire bad stretch, basically. That's been the question. That's been the problem, is that we haven't been able to get a good enough starting pitching to even be in a game, more or less. So then they go out and they make these offseason moves, and you're like, okay, I like these offseason moves. I like every single one of them they did with the rotation, and it's going to take Brady Singer keeping it up, right? And you're like, okay, we're in business here. it's just so different because we're not used to seeing it. And they've had good bullpens or good pitchers in their bullpens, even with the bad starting pitching. So if you can start there, you like the chances. We obviously like Bobby Witt Jr. I think a lot of us, most of us, probably thought Salvador Perez still has plenty left in the tank. MJ Melendez, boy, I'm going to tell you, honestly, I had zero expectations for MJ Melendez this year. That would be, holy smokes. If he can go, that's going to be massive for this team. Michael Garcia, I think after last year, it was fair that a lot of us thought there could be a step forward for him. Vinny Pasquantino has done little to nothing so far, so he needs to get it going. There's a lot of upside in the lineup too, is the point of that. So you have all this upside in the starting rotation, all this upside in the lineup. You start there, and you're like, okay, we have a contender. Now it's the nuance of, can you navigate a bullpen that's underwhelming, probably, to be fair? Can you find what you need? Will they be willing at the trade deadline to go and add to that? I think the answer to that is certainly yes. My question is, do they have the horses to get it done? They went and traded for a pitcher yesterday, which was interesting. I haven't dug in deep enough yet to know if that's like somebody they're trying to maybe bring into the bullpen. I'm not 100% sure on the move they made yesterday. But I just love that we have this now. And it's amazing what spending just a little bit of money will do. And they go in and they spend a little money in the starting rotation, and boom, there you go. Like, that's the difference here, Tommy, as much as anything else, is that they've spent a little money in the rotation. That's all it's taken. And they're right there. And we love, a couple of their young players. We love Salvador Perez. I do think the rotation's got staying power. Do I think it's going to be the best rotation, in baseball by the end of the year? No, I do not. Do I think it's going to be really, really good? Yes, I do. I do. If they stay healthy, I like this mix of guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we know about Cole Reagans and we know about the kind of pitcher he is, and he showed that off last season. He's continued that on to this season, and I'm glad to see that there hasn't really been, at least through the first couple of starts, a drop-off from last year to this year for Cole Reagans. Of course, what Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo have brought to the table have been really important, and I really think that also there's something to be said for an overall improved rotation and how that can impact positively Brady Singer's development. When he's in a rotation,
putting guys in the room with
bad pitchers, that's not going to help him grow. It's not going to help him develop and reach his maximum potential. It's just not. And so if you can, and this is what the Royals did, they replaced the scrubs. They replaced the Brad Kellers of the world. And, I've got a ton of respect for what Zach Greinke did in his career, but he was a shell of his former self last year in Kansas City. You replace those guys with quality starting pitching that Brady Singer can be around and work with and soak up and all of that. Brady Singer's been improved this year early on. Will that continue throughout the season? Time will tell, but they've been solid in that regard. We didn't know much about Alec Marsh before he, started the season. He's been okay. He's been okay too.
Yeah,
I mean,
fine.
He's been a guy that, you can throw in there as a fifth starter, and he's been serviceable in that role. So overall, really, I'm trying to think back in the first 10 games. Has there been a bad pitching? I mean, there been a couple average outings, but I don't think there's been a bad pitching outing through the first 10 games.
No, Wacha had a bad starting pitching. Wacha had a bad inning in his first game, but it was like a 3-run inning, right? And then he sort of salvaged it. So it wasn't it wasn't bad. I wouldn't even say that's bad. I would say that's normal, right?
The best case for the Royals moving forward is going to be that you continue having quality outings from the starters and that the offense is able to give you quite a bit of run support, because with the way the bullpen is right now, I mean, if you're getting into a 1-run game, you're not always going to be playing the White Sox.
Yeah.
And it was good for Will Smith to get that, over the weekend, but you're not always going to be playing the White Sox. I think you need to have a little bit more of a cushion when you turn the ball over to the bullpen.
I think the most important thing is the starting pitching stays healthy. I do think that you have to allow just a little bit of wiggle room in the bullpen, which is a bullpen of unknowns. Let's be real, to sort of chisel out their roles a little better. I don't want Quatraro to get so stuck in his idea of what he thinks this thing should look like and be more about let's see how it sort of shakes itself out. I think there's a decent chance there's 2 to 3, highly effective relievers in the mix there. You've just got to identify which guys those are and put them in their best position to do it. What I wonder about when I see this year, organizationally, the Royals have been a much better franchise at identifying and developing position players than they have pitching. They've been pretty terrible. They've developed that I can remember, and I am not a lifelong Royals fan, so I am certain there are more than this, so bear with me. But that I can remember in like the recent memory, it's Zach Greinke and it's Giordano Ventura. Am I missing anybody else?
I mean, Brady Singer's on that list, probably.
Maybe, maybe
right now.
I think he's definitely a maybe at this point.
But you're right. When you look at
and that's with drafting legendary them all in the high picks for like 6 years.
When you look at legendary Royals players that came up through the farm system, you're pretty much looking at position players. Like you just are. That's really the way that Alex Gordon and Billy Butler and all these other guys. Now Bobby Witt Jr. But yeah, pitching hasn't been the strong suit in the farm system really ever. Outside of Greinke, really Greinke is the only one.
And look, I'm a huge Danny Duffy fan. I think he's a success story. But I'm talking about like dominant, no doubt about it. Did Apier come up with the Royals? I don't even know the answer to that. And Brett Saberhagen, was he a lifelong Royal? Those would be the other two that come to my mind. And they've had some good relievers now that have come through. So the point of me even bringing this up.
Yeah, Saberhagen was drafted by the Royals. He was with that.
So he's obviously on that list. Mm-hmm. But organizationally, and that's a long time ago. If you know what you're good at, right? Just know what you're good at, identify that. And I think what the franchise should learn right now is you're far better off either trading for or in free agency finding established pitchers than trying to develop them. You haven't been good at that forever, right? Giordano Ventura was an electric arm that was going to be pretty hard to screw up. Zach Greinke is a Hall of Famer. Brett Saberhagen is a Hall of Famer. Is Brett Saberhagen a Hall of Famer?
I don't think so.
But really good, right? Perennial All-Star, whatever you want to say. So like sometimes things slip through, but for the most part, they've been pretty bad at it markedly. Like the Rangers, they're franchises that just aren't good at it. They can't do it. And so it's like, okay, now then, if that's going to be the case, organizationally, if you've got a franchise and an ownership group that will be willing to spend a little money, focus on what you're good at in baseball sometimes, right? Continue to develop all these great young positional players, bring them up, and you'll find your pitching in free agency. Or if you have good young good young hitters, you just go trade for your pitching. Teams do this all the time.
Yeah.
Not every team developing pitching in Major League Baseball is by far the hardest thing to do. So if you're not good at it, don't stop. Don't start just, continuing to stay down this path of being really bad at it. Go do what you're good at.
They've got
bring in good pitchers.
They've got some talent from the pitching staff in the farm system right now. They've got high draft picks that they've used. They've got guys like Frank Mazzucato. They've got Mason Barnett. They've got a few other guys that are pitchers that, look to have potential. Is it just going to be, are they going to be able to get them over the hump and get them to the big leagues? I think that recently, it's been well documented a couple of years ago when the Royals brought up all those prospects, especially the pitchers, well before they were ready, and they just got absolutely demolished in the big leagues.
That's when they were supposed to be ready. Those were college pitchers.
They weren't ready to take that next step into the majors, but they had to out of necessity, and they just got blown up in the big leagues. I'm sure that, it's more of a cautious approach now. Think about a guy like Asa Lacy, for example, that was a high draft pick from Kansas City, and he was supposed to be the future of the rotation. Where is he now? What's he doing now?
I have no idea. I don't know where any of those guys are now.
It's
I'm over all of them.
That's been a major issue for Kansas City in development. I agree with you. I'm hopeful that with this new staff in place, with Quatrero in place, they've made, I think, at least they've been working on some organizational changes in the farm system. It's not an overnight thing, there, for sure. But I'd like to think that maybe moving forward, they'll be able to develop talent, because that, of course, that was the appeal of Quatrero coming over from Tampa Bay.
It's more of a Piccolo thing to me, even than it. Quatrero's got his hands full trying to sort out a bullpen, right? Like he's got to get through that much of it. Organizational changes have to happen. And look, we didn't know about Piccolo. He was part of the old staff, whatever. He's done an outstanding job. And we didn't know last year. We were seriously considered like we were wondering, like, is he going to be the guy here? They're not doing anything. Well, what's he done? He identified Cole Reagans, number 1. And he went out and he identified Lugo and Waka 2 and 3. And that's the start of your rotation right there. If you look at the Royal, and I don't know what Alec Marsh is going to do. We'll see. But Brady Singer has shown flashes of this throughout his career. I think there's at least, at minimum, a 50-50 chance it sticks and he finally gets it this year. All the other stuff have been the general manager going out and identifying players that weren't a part of the system. And that's a part of this too, right? And it will be highly critical at trade deadlines that they still be able to do that. I think for the Royals to be the most successful franchise they can be, it's more realistic that they continue to be good at identifying players in the marketplace versus trying to develop them themselves. Now, if they can do that, great. So be it. The other thing I'll say about starting pitching and all the investments you make in starting pitching, it is so fickle injury-wise. I think I've come around to this, and seeing Shane Bieber and Spencer Strider and all these like major arms, some of the best arms. It is rare to get consistency from a guy to be able to just pitch forever. Whatever the reason for that is, smarter people than I can debate that, but it's reality. So aren't you better off investing more of your resources in what is more consistent and then trying to go find the other things on the market? I think that it's the right approach, certainly for the Royals and probably for a lot of teams, to sit and really invest your resources, your money, and all these things into getting your positional players, but being willing to spend and going and identifying. And if Piccolo can do that, if he can continue to do that and identify, trade targets or free agent targets that fit, that's going to be the path for this franchise.
To that point, I asked what happened to Asa Lacy. He was the number 4 overall pick back in 2020. Tommy John surgery. He won't pitch again until mid-2025. Since he was drafted in 2020, in 4 years with the Royals organization, he's thrown 80 innings between single A ball and double A ball. And, who knows at that point? That's the 4th overall draft pick back in 2020. And so I think that to that point, if you can continue to develop the position players, but then don't lean on that from a pitching perspective, you may have to go out there and trade some assets or spend some money in free agency. And that's to the credit of Quatrero and Piccolo. That's what they did in free agency this year to get Waka and to get Lugo. They traded for Cole Reagans. Are they ever going to go out there and open their pocketbook for the top tier free agents? Probably not. But they are, it looks like they do at least have a willingness moving forward to be able to go and make sure that they've got as talented of a rotation, at least, that they possibly can. I think that maybe because that priority was the rotation, do you feel good about the decisions they made in acquisitions in the bullpen? Probably not. I mean, I know how you feel about Will Smith overall.
Well, he's not. I don't want to pick on Will Smith, by the way. It's just he's not going to be the team's closer. I mean, I can tell you that before the season starts. It's just not the case. Is he handy? Probably, but he's not the team's closer. I mean, he's just not. So I don't know if he was a good acquisition. Go back. Let's look at this. I just pulled up their first round picks as a franchise. And I want to read you some names of pitchers they've taken in the first round. And listen, asterisk, Major League Baseball drafts are always fickle, right? Sean Manaea was a good one back in 2013. Okay, since then, Brandon Finnegan, Foster Griffin, Ash Russell, Nolan Watson, Brady Singer, Jackson Kowar, Daniel Lynch, Asa Lacy, up until the recent guys who it's too early to tell on them. I mean, maybe Brady Singer sticks out there. That's
yeah,
it.
and I, you know,
And you're
Daniel
talking about
Lynch
10
and
years of drafting here.
Daniel Lynch and Jackson Kowar, that's who I was referencing a couple of years ago when the Royals, I think, brought them up way too soon. They didn't have a choice. I mean, they had to have.
I mean,
they had to have rotational pieces, but those guys were not ready to
guys.
go. And
they
both
did
of them
that
got
to
blown
pull 'em.
up in the rotation.
They weren't developed the right way at bare minimum. Now we'll see. But my point is, just don't force it. If a guy falls, that's fine, but don't force it. Let this year and this start, and we're 10 games in, but let it be the example. You don't have to try to draft an you don't have to do it that way. There are pitchers every year that fly under the radar. Look at how long it took Jordan Montgomery to get signed this year. Are you kidding me? Like, these guys are out there. I hope that Lugo and Waka are outstanding all year because it sets a path, a more realistic path forward for the franchise to get this thing done. Royals are really good. They're off today. They start a series with the Astros at Kauffman. Should be fantastic. That starts tomorrow, not tonight. We'll come back. More Sports Daily right after this. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily, Jake Albracht, Tommy Castor here. Wind surge at their opening weekend in the books. Weather cooperated as much as it was going to, I think. You were there opening night, Tommy. I was out of town. I haven't been yet. I will be. Minimum to root on my buddy Matt, who's now the GM out there. But I, from what I could tell and what I've heard, it went really well. How was it out there? You were there Friday?
Yeah, it was their Friday night. It was a great crowd. I think that they announced around 9,000 people for opening night, which is outstanding. Congrats to Jay Miller and Matt Hamilton out there. The weather cooperated, I guess.
Yeah.
It was very, very smoky, like hazy. We took our boys, and we've got almost 3-year-old and almost 1-year-old. My wife and I were kind of like,
how long did they make it?
We made it to the 7th inning stretch, and
that's pretty good.
We sang "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," and then it was time to go home. We wanted to make it all the way because fireworks, and we knew our boys would like it, but we couldn't make it that far. We were pretty happy with 7th inning stretch though. But we were even talking like, is it safe like to be outside for that long for our like little baby to breathe in smoke? But other than that, it was fun. It was a good time. They've done a great job with the fan experience, and I know they've got new concession items and things like that. So it was a lot of fun, and just congratulations to them.
Yeah, we hope that the momentum that was started last year to correct a lot of the issues from the years prior continues, and I know that it will. The Surge are off today like they are on every Monday. They're on the road this week in Springfield. Then they're back next week for the home games against Tulsa. Yeah. And you'll have them Tuesday through Sunday. I'll have more giveaways at that point, all kinds of good stuff. But yeah, that's remember how the minor league schedule works now. This started, I think, last year, where they just kind of go a week at home, week on the road. That's how they're scheduled out. It simplifies it.
Limits the travel probably, which is nice. You're not going back and forth every couple of games. And by the way, we haven't talked about the Wichita Thunder in a long time. They wrapped up their home regular season yesterday. Had a big crowd at Intrust Bank Arena for that. And I think they're still in the playoff hunt, I believe, from last I heard. Not officially eliminated, but battling for like a final playoff spot. They're on the road this final week for a chance to maybe try to make it to the playoffs, I think, for the first time since 2021.
Can't tell you how much we always appreciate Ted and Jads when he does them sports updates, when they include that stuff, because it makes it easier. We get so and it's just so consumed by college basketball this time of year. But hopefully the Thunder can make it in. They're in the West. I'm just trying to pull that up here. They're in 12th right now. But they are,
in their division. I think they're 5th or 6th in their division, and each division gets the top 4. They move on. 16 teams total. So I think they're right. Maybe like a few points out of that final playoff spot. So I think they're going to need some help, and they're going to need to, they're going to need some help, I think, from other teams above them to get in, but I don't think it's out of the question yet.
I think I saw the indoor football team, which is now the Renegades, start soon. I think the Wichita Wings have some playoff games soon. We love you, all the minor league teams out there. We root for you. So good luck to everybody that's beginning seasons or coming down the home stretch of theirs. College basketball comes down the home stretch tonight. You got a national championship game. UConn's a 6.5-point favorite on ESPN Bet right now. We're both on the UConn side of that. I don't love either the over or the under. I've got to figure out a way that I'm going to attack this game. I can't do it yet. I don't want to, as much as I like UConn minus 6.5, maybe I'll just at the end of it say forget it and just do it. I just don't want to root for UConn tonight. That's my dilemma there. I don't want to do it. Then the other story we continue to follow is this Calipari thing. Look, this Kentucky job, it's as good as any job in the country. You've got Kentucky, you've got Kansas, you've got Duke, you've got Carolina. To me, those are the 4 best jobs that exist in college basketball, and one of them just opened up with an open pocketbook for the spender. So really everybody's on the table, with the exception of, the other 3 schools coaches that we just mentioned. Everybody else is a candidate.
It's going to be awesome. I can't wait for this search.
I'm very nervous about it because I don't want it to involve Jerome Tang. Like we survived that. We got Tang staying in Manhattan. For that to change 3 or 4 days later would be excruciating. Excruciating. Man, we'll be right back. We'll wrap up Sports Daily after this. All right, that does it for us here. We've got regular programming today. So Jim Rome follows us here, Bob and Jeff locally from 2 to 4, and then CBS Sports Radio programming, Zach Gelb, JR Sport Brief, take you through the remainder of the day. National championship tonight. We'll have a chance to talk about it. I hope Purdue pulls the upset. I don't think that's the bet to make, but I hope it happens, Tommy. Royals are off today. They'll get back in action tomorrow in a big one. Here we go. We'll have a champion tomorrow. Maybe we'll have a new Kentucky coach. Who knows? We'll get through it all. Tommy, enjoy the Monday.
Good. See you back here tomorrow.
For Chad and Tommy, I'm Jacob. See you then.